Well, good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery. It's my pleasure to get together with you this morning. We get together with our distribution partners most weekday mornings at this time, 8 o'clock Central, to talk about strategies, tips, techniques, share success stories, and to support each of you. Today, we're going to offer a reminder of the 27 mistake curriculum. It's an important part of the financial literacy that we integrate in to client implementation, but it's also essentially a PowerPoint deck that you could use to generate clients, to educate through chambers, churches, libraries, online or in person, because what we teach in this curriculum, which we'll briefly go through together this morning, is an overview of how to become credible for funding. What you and I do as technical advisors, we're really helping two different entities with their credibility. There's the individual, the person, the key person, the business owner, however you want to reference them. And we know that the 3 C's matter: credit, collateral, and capacity. Through the credit and funding program, we help the business owner, the key person, the client, become credible in those 3 areas. But we can't ignore that the business matters as well. If our goal is to get business funding, to no surprise, the credibility of the business impacts access to capital. Now, it's not all or nothing, but certainly we're sadly mistaken to think that a business that is not credible on paper is not. It's true to think that a business that's not credible on paper is going to have less access to capital. Thus, conversely, a business that is more credible on paper will have greater access to capital. So what I want to do is briefly go through this PowerPoint deck. It would take too much time as compared to what we have allocated for this morning training, but I want to go through the highlights. Any of you who are a white label partner, you'll find this deck in your white label partner Dropbox. If you don't, let us know and we can get it to you. So I'm going to do a little bit of a role play, but certainly some sidebar discussion, just so you can understand why this is so relevant to what you and I do, both in terms of client development. It's a great client development tool through education, financial literacy, and then certainly it is integrated already into our client implementation. So as we see on the screen, it says funding guide, 27 mistakes that will get you denied for business credit and loans. And then we also introduce them to the credit and funding program to get at least $100,000 to start or grow a business. So why is this important? Why does this matter? Well, lenders and credit issuers will often automatically decline applicants if they do not meet their approval standards. So there's a formula that we need to meet for approval. And if we meet it, we often get automatic approvals. And if we don't meet it, we get declined. Sidebar. You'll often have clients that come to you and say, "Oh my God, man, I just want funding." But what we have to do is step back and say, well, you have to be credible enough on paper to get funding. We need to worry about the credibility of you as an individual, which we help, of course, with the 3 C's. And then there's also the relevance of the credibility of the business, which is what we're talking about here. All right, so back to the curriculum. So knowing this formula is key to determining how to get approved and why we might have been declined. It is very important on the 4th bullet here to recognize that there's not a one size fits all. There's different sources of capital and they have different underwriting criteria, different requirements. So what we do is we gather data about the client and their business and then match them to the right type of funding based upon their mitigating circumstances. But it is just inaccurate. It's illiterate to think, oh, my business doesn't matter. If I want business funding, the credibility of my business matters. Now, if I just want personal funding, then the credibility of my business doesn't matter. But in general, what you and I do is help people get credible enough for business funding. As we say here in the red, don't worry about it. That's what we do, is we help clients become credible enough. That's the role that you and I serve as technical advisors. So again, I'm not going to go through in painstaking detail each of these mistakes. I just want to give you a high level overview. And if you want to plug into the full curriculum, of course you can. But the first mistake is based around a mismatch when there's an inconsistency. Maybe it could be as simple as the client says their business name is X, but it's not actually filed with the Secretary of State, or it's listed differently. So it's important that we match. And I know this sounds obvious, but it is mistake number one. We do see it on occasion where there's an inconsistency between the business name and what is on official record. We also want to make sure that other documents reflect it as well, such as utility bills, if applicable, bank statements, and so forth. All right, mistake number two, not being in good standing. So once we form the entity with the Secretary of State, we want to make sure the Secretary of State shows that it's in good standing, that it's active. And for many states, there's annual reports. And so a novice would say, oh my gosh, man, I'm going to have to pay the Secretary of State every year to keep my business in good standing. Yes, yeah, that is a fundamental element of maintaining a credible business, is forming a credible business initially with the Secretary of State, and then secondly, keeping it current. Absolutely. This is not about a hobby. This is not about, just babysitting out of our back bedroom. This is in fact actually running a credible business that is worthy of being able to receive large capital amounts. Okay, mistake number three, high risk industry. And of course, each entrepreneur has to decide whatever it is they want to do, but we do need to recognize that different industries are perceived differently from the risk factors, and even the name of the business can indicate to the lender or place a flag that it's high risk. So high risk industries include things like ammunitions or weapons, bail bonds, check cashing, trading, pawn shops, adult entertainment, and so forth. So again, we're not here to redirect clients from doing what they want to do, but we do want to be cognizant that the perceived risk of our industry can impact our access to capital. Entity selection, we need to have an entity. An LLC or a corporation gives us more credibility than a DBA. We're big advocates for C corporations as opposed to S corporations, but ultimately that's up to the client. Ultimately, we need to get the entity filed in the state that has their business address. That's where we see the best results. If we file in a different state than where the primary business address is, that can cause some red flags. Of course, we have our business startup package where we'll actually, and our grant covers it, file for the client in with the Secretary of State and provide a true commercial address. But we'll come back to addresses a little bit later. Then we need to get an EIN, sometimes called a TIN, tax identification number, or employer identification number. We need to have that. It's like the social security number of the business, free and easy and fast to get. Through our business startup package, we help clients get that, but a lot of clients you'll work with probably already have it. Certainly we'll need that to be able to open a bank account and to build out trade lines. So if our goal is to have the business creditworthy, and we'll talk more about that as we go along, we need to have extensions of credit through the business, and you're not going to be able to accomplish that without an EIN number, of course. We also want to make sure that the addresses match. We talked about filing with the Secretary of State, and the address with the Secretary of State also needs to match what's listed with the IRS, which is the address that we provide when we get our EIN. All right, business address. Let's dig deeper into that. This is a common barrier that we see. I was talking to one of our top referral partners, Neville, this morning. This is a common barrier or obstacle that we see that clients often have. They don't have a credible address. So again, when we go through this, these are not my opinions. So my opinion, frankly, doesn't matter. No offense, but your opinion really doesn't matter. What matters is how the lending world looks at these different factors. So what I'm telling you with clear objectivity is the business address matters. So it should be a true commercial address, not a home address. That's bad. Not a post office box. That's not good either. We need a true commercial business address. Now, as I'm going through, and we're only on mistake 6 of 27, I'll pick up the pace so we make sure we get finished on time. I am not telling you that it's all or nothing. I'm going through a checklist of how to have an optimally credible business on paper. So you might have a client that says, no, F you. I work out of my back bedroom, and that's all I'm going to do. And my business is registered to my home address, and that's just the way it is. And it's like, all right, you're the client. But it is wrong. It's illogical. It's illiteracy to think that the address that we have on record doesn't matter. It will impact our access to capital. So moving on. So in many cases, especially for larger loans, lenders are going to check the address. And so you might say, oh, it's Suite B, but you're using your home address, or you have some post office box or some sort of virtual office. Any of those things are not credible, or not as credible. Lenders are going to typically check. We're not going to game the system. We should not anticipate gaming the system. But if we know the system, we can play within those rules and we can get access to more capital. And the point here on this bullet is there's the Reguses and WeWorks and so forth, where you can go get a virtual address, but if it's a shared address, it's not good. It needs to be a unique address that's just for your business to be credible. Now, also, there's different types of lenders that the location matters. Like we do a lot with the Chapman Fund. I think you're aware of that. The Chapman Fund's good because it's from a taxing authority. In other words, it's easier to get. We don't have to go through a bank. The downside is the Chapman Fund maxes out at $250,000. So it may just have to be the first round of funding for clients that need a larger capital raise. But geographic area matters as well. Business phone number. Business phone number is another sign of credibility. Even if you're a home-based business, we should have a true commercial address on record from the past slide. And then we need to have a business phone number, not a cell phone number, not a residential number. And that's easy to do. It is recommended to have a fax number as well. I know that may seem antiquated, but it does make us look more credible. So again, not all or nothing, but we're going through a quick checklist here of things that makes a business credible. On the personal side, we focus on the 3 C's: credit, collateral, capacity. Here we're talking about how we help clients on the business side. All right, moving forward, having a website and email address. Issuers of credit will typically look up the company. So again, we can't just think, oh, I need money, I want money, everything will be fine. We need to look good on paper. And so our website and our email address fits into that. Not having a website will hurt the chances of getting funding. Again, not all or nothing, but will impact us. And the email address, oh my gosh, we don't want to be using Yahoo or AOL or Gmail or any of that. That makes us look like a novice. And so I'm not saying it makes the entrepreneur a bad person, but think about it. If you're a lender and you're being asked to fund $100,000 or $250,000 or $1 million to a business, and if they don't look credible, it scares them to death, right? And not even having a true business email is a credibility factor that will impact them. But we can help them with all of this as we go through the credit and funding program. So our goal, sidebar, our goal is not to create concern for clients, but at some point we need to educate them. We need to build their financial literacy. So this curriculum is part of the implementation for every client, so they get access to it on their onboarding. What I mentioned at the beginning, for those of you that came in late, is also this can be used as a way to generate clients to go out to the marketplace in person or virtually and educate people about what it takes to become credible, and of course, how you and I can help them. Okay, moving forward. Business bank account. I know you're hitting your head saying, Tom, you're a dummy. Of course, I need to have a business bank account for my business, but you might be surprised. There's a lot of clients that do not have a business bank account. And so we want to open that as soon as possible. We'll get clients that'll say crazy stuff like, well, I don't have any activity yet. Well, it doesn't matter if you have activity. You need to have the business bank account open. Most business lenders will wire the loan proceeds into the business bank account. And to not have a business bank account is a tremendous hit to the business's credibility. All right. Business licensing. This varies by industry. And of course, not all industries require license, but if a license is required, of course, they should have it. Business credit reporting. We help clients create a credible business through like Dun & Bradstreet, help them get their DUNS number, help them add trade lines, which we'll talk about in a moment. Here, what we're talking about is actually getting the profile set up. So it's there, and then we can turn around and build business credit, which is on number 12. We have a client we were working on this morning with one of our white label partners, and the client has a home-based business. We cannot successfully build business credit off of a home-based business. Now, please don't misinterpret. The business owner might work from their home, but we need a true official address. And that's one of the things that you and I do with the business startup package is provide these folks a true commercial address so we can do this, so we can go build credit lines, add trade lines under the business, under the EIN. So we're not entirely dependent upon the business owner's individual credit. Business credit, of course, is different than personal credit, goes from 0 to 100. There's 3 primary business credit bureaus. We need to have at least an 80 on each. Dun & Bradstreet, their score is called Paydex. Experian has what's called IntelliScore. But we can help clients get credible business credit quickly and typically get $5,000 to $10,000 of business credit in the first 30 days. All right, we need personal credit. Of course, now we're spilling over and talking about the credibility of the individual, but I think we're all familiar with that, so we won't need to spend much time there. Collateral, you understand that's one of the 3 C's of lending, making sure that there's collateral on paper that can be pledged. With the credit and funding program, we take care of that for them, so that's not an issue moving forward. Having a business plan. And the truth is, different lenders have different expectations for business plans, and there's some sources of capital that do not require a business plan at all. But in general, a business plan is helpful, if nothing else, for you and I to figure out what the heck is the client trying to do. Have a different white label partner, a different client, and we're talking about the client's file, and it's confusing. There's not enough clarification for any of us to know what's going on in the mind of the entrepreneur, of the client. The business plan should resolve that, right? It should help us understand, okay, what is the business model? Who owns it? Is it a startup? Has it existed? What are we trying to do? How much money do we want? What are we going to use that money for? It tells the story. I think in many cases, lesser sophisticated entrepreneurs, they have that information maybe in their head, but that's not how it's going to be conveyed through the lending process. It needs to be in writing. We need to have a business plan. We help them with that, of course, no cost. We need to have financial projections that project out 36 months in advance. We help them with that. We need to identify very clearly what we want to use the money for. We'll have clients that come to us and say, okay, I want to enroll. I need funding for my business. Great. We help them get enrolled. It's like, okay, how much funding do you need? I don't know. Well, that's where we need to start with, right? Do you need $100, 100,000, 100 million? We've got to figure out what the heck it is that you're needing money to spend. It shouldn't just be, well, I'd love to have some money, so whatever I can get. No, what does your business need? What's it going to be used for? How does that translate into the growth of the revenue and the profitability of the business? So we need to have a uses of funds. We help them with that. Industry experience, not required by all lenders, but we do want to see, and that's why we collect a bio or a resume of the business owner, is, have you ever done this before or something similar to this before? Is it a requirement for all types of funding? No, it's not, but it helps us determine where to go for funding. Advisors, we don't believe that entrepreneurs should go it alone, that they should have a team, and you and I should be part of that team, hopefully. They should have a CPA that helps with tax guidance and tax returns, an attorney, a business coach, possibly what they're going to do after they get the funding. And I know many of you serve that role. They're going to need insurance, right? Every business needs insurance. So do they have an insurance agent to get the right coverage at the right price? And then, of course, we serve as their technical advisor, we meaning you and I together. Mistake number 20 of 27, feasibility data makes it stronger. That's where we can actually use third-party information to validate our projections. We need to understand who our target market is, who's our client base that we're going to be offering our services to. So like with what you and I do as technical advisors with the credit and funding program, our target market, our primary target market would be entrepreneurs that have credibility issues with their C's, credit, collateral, capacity, because that's what you and I do. We help fix those credibility issues. Does that mean that we can't help people that don't have credibility issues? No. I have a client I was talking to towards the end of the day yesterday, and he's got darn near an 800 credit score. He's very, very credible. I mean, we're moving right into funding immediately. So when we identify our target market, it doesn't mean that we refuse to help other people, but it acknowledges who our target market is. Take Victoria's Secret for lingerie. Their target market is women, right? But if a man went in to buy his wife or significant other a gift, would they sell the lingerie to the man? Of course. So it's not about discrimination, but we need to know who our primary target market is so we can reach them effectively. All right, on to 22, historical financial statements. This is a huge one because earlier in this discussion, we talked about projections. So projections means not in the past, but in the future. So do we help clients create financial projections? Yes. Do many lenders want to see that? Yes. So what do we expect to happen in the future? No one knows for sure, but we make an educated guess. Now on 22 that we're on now, we're not talking about the future. We're talking about the past. And so this is a key credibility issue that we see many entrepreneurs have. So even as a startup, we should be able to produce key financial statements, such as a balance sheet, income statement, sometimes called profit and loss. So you'll get pushback from, and I say this affectionately, financially illiterate clients. Oh, you don't understand. I'm a startup. I don't have a balance sheet. Well, fine. We need to create one. Oh, no. I'm a startup. It doesn't apply to me. That's entirely bullshit. We need to be able to create a balance sheet, even if you just formed the business yesterday. Same with income statement, profit and loss. So that's the point here. We have some legal and innovative ways to make those financials look stronger, even if they're thin, but we need to be able to create financial statements if we're looking for business funding. I even have some of my smartest referral partners, affiliates and white label partners will come back and they want to push back. But it's like, it's craziness to think that we want to go to lenders and borrow 6 or 7 digits, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and we don't think that they're going to expect to see financial statements, even if a startup. That's craziness. That's a mistake. That's a mistake that we're going to correct, though, for the client. Typically, getting these financial statements is not a barrier. It's not difficult, but people will want to go wing it out of their orifice, and that's not the way it should be. We should have some sort of software like QuickBooks. We don't have any financial interest in QuickBooks, but something like QuickBooks where we import the data in, we manage the data within the software like QuickBooks, and then generating the reports is so simple. And so you'll hear us say over and over, hey, do you have QuickBooks or something like that? If not, we probably need to get it, or we're going to need to work with your accountant or your CPA. So do all sources of capital require financial statements? No. But what we're talking about today are 27 mistakes that prevent clients from getting, entrepreneurs from getting the optimal credit and funding they need. And having financial statements is certainly an important one. Move on to 23. Insurance, I don't sell insurance. I'm not trying to sell insurance, but it is ridiculous to think that a business can be credible and not have any insurance. That's ridiculous, but we'll let the insurance agents advise each client on their own needs. Inadequate cash contribution. This is the one that no one wants to talk about. It's the forbidden topic, but you and I are transparent. So what are we doing? We're right here talking about it right now. Inadequate cash contribution. If you want to borrow money from a bank, typical lenders are going to look for the borrower to contribute 10 to 30. We'll just round it off and average it and call it 20% of the project. And so most banks, most traditional lenders do not want to lend 100% of the cost of the quote unquote project. So what does that mean? That means that normally the borrower needs to bring some contribution to the table. So for example, let's say the client says, okay, I need $100,000 for the project. $100,000 for the project. Well, then the bank would normally loan $80,000 and the business owner would contribute or bring $20,000. So for traditional lending, there's typically a cash contribution that's needed. You might say, uh-oh, now we've got a problem because the client doesn't have cash contribution. That's okay. We can go in and layer it or stack it. So it's okay to enroll a client that doesn't have a cash contribution, but it's not okay to recognize that it's probably going to be part of the capital raise strategy. So in other words, we may need to do an initial tranche to create liquidity and then move on as a separate step for the larger funding. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, we're almost done. Not running a business like a business is mistake number 25. Many mistakes. We talked about QuickBooks earlier. We strongly recommend clients not be self-employed, that they be employed by their business, W-2 employee, direct deposits, and we can help them do that. These are soft factors that can make the client and the business more fundable. We want to run a business like a business, not like a hobby. You know, for a hobby, you're not going to able to go out and borrow 100 or 200 or 500,000. For a business, we can. So we've got to run a business like a business. All right, picking the wrong business for your circumstances. This is another incredibly unpopular slide, but it's truth. It's truth. So regardless of your education, experience, passion, interest, we need to work in reverse. How much access to capital do you have? And then let's build a business plan that matches your circumstances. Here's hyperbole, an exaggerated example. Let's say I really love cars, which I guess I kind of do, but I want to go compete with Elon Musk and Tesla. It's ridiculous for me to think of that in the short term. I don't have anywhere near the borrowing capacity to go start a competitor to Tesla. So we know that any business can get at least 100,000. That's our promise, our commitment, our contractual guarantee. But we cannot promise anyone to go get $1 billion or even $1 million. And so there has to be some reasonable reconciliation to what our credibility is and how much funding we're looking for. We're always good for 100,000. More than that, it's based upon the client's credibility, of course. As our final mistake, we want to make sure that we want to make sure you understand that different sources of capital have different underwriting criteria. And so that's part of what we're doing. We're gathering data from the client, figuring out what the funding plan should be, and then making sure that they meet the underwriting criteria. We may, in fact, have to layer in multiple sources of capital to get from where we're at to where we need to be. But we are 100% sure that any business can get at least 100,000. So as I wrap this up, this is our 27 mistake financial literacy training. We provide this to every client once they enroll, so they're of the right mindset. My point in sharing it with you today is twofold. Number one, you have access to this. So if you want to use this as a financial literacy tool to generate more clients to teach in person or online through churches, chambers, libraries, what have you. You're certainly encouraged to do so. And then the second reason that we're covering it today is sometimes I feel that some of you think that the business doesn't need to be credible to get funding. And while that's true in some instances, the credibility of the business typically does matter. And so it's not all or nothing, but I went through 27 areas. We'll assess each client, create a plan for them. Many of these clients will benefit from the business startup package. It provides the formation of the business, the Secretary of State filing, the EIN. It provides the building of the business trade lines, and it provides access to the Chapman Fund, which we talked about earlier. The Chapman Fund's not necessarily the best thing since sliced bread, but it's a relatively easy source of the first $250,000. It provides a commercial address, a real address that makes the business credible. So with that being said, we'll wrap up today's training. If you need assistance, you have questions, anything that we can do to help you, let us know. But this is information that you needed to be aware of and you may want to use as part of your community outreach. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.